Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting edge information, and conversation while exploring the quantum possibilities. Where am I? Sorry, we're a tiny bit late. Mercury retrograde is a non event, right? So, how's that for putting it out to the universe and just collapsing that wave to the other possibilities? Hi, guys. I see you all in the chat room. My goodness, it's so good to see you. So happy you're here with us. I'm so excited to talk with our guest. He's got an excellent voice. I think we're going to have fun with him tonight. Before we get started, as always, I want to open with massive gratitude for you, for being here, for being in the chat room, for your presence, for your communion with us, right? Because when we interact and when we share information and when we meet in the ethers, because we're not necessarily face to face, it is communion. So we're so grateful for you. Grateful for telling your friends to join us. And, we understand you need to tell those friends, right? Not the people who are going to say, wait a minute, you're talking about UFOs, right? Those other friends, yeah. Thank you for telling them about us and bring them here with you, right? Augie, oh wait, I want to invite you to one other thing. Every Sunday, we have the Mastermind Connection. It's like a spiritual think tank, if you will. We come together and essentially we're putting the law of attraction into action. We are coming up with an intention. It's mostly, benevolent intentions for world events, weather patterns, peace during the election, that are really important, and things that we are not the only people masterminding, but some of the changes that are happening, I have to say, I think it's from people changing, right? Changing the reality with our thought power. Come join us on Sundays, 2 p.m. Eastern. Then we hang around at 3 p.m. to play and talk and just to dialogue and share really, out of the box information. To get the Zoom link, you can send us a Gmail. Easy for me to say. You can send us an email to themastermindconnection@gmail.com, themastermindconnection@gmail.com. Augie, I'm going to zip it for a while and see if I can get this in order. You want to tell us about our guest, Brad?
Yeah, how can I follow that?
Woo!
All right. Now, as you listeners probably figured it out by now that we love to have fun, and we do. And I tell you, though, we are going to have a phenomenal guest, but we're going to discuss some really interesting stuff. So don't go anywhere. In the old days, we used to say, don't touch the dial. Yeah, so don't do that. Anyway, we have Bret Lueder with us. And I want to say a few things about him for those few of you that don't know him, because he's very well known in the out-of-the-box arena. He has a degree in journalism and an option in public relations. And that probably explains why he has gone on and done some of the things that he has done later on, like written about 700 articles on music, alternative history, UFOs, spirituality for magazines like Phenomena Magazine, Magical Blend Magazine, UFO Magazine, and a bunch of other ones. He has also written a couple of books, and we're going to talk about those books because there are some really interesting subjects in there. And there are more books in the works that he is, I think a couple of them that he is working on simultaneously and getting that out. And also what caught my eye was a 2 DVD set that he has created. The title of that DVD set is Inside Mount Shasta. And there he talked about him working with the ambassador of Telos, whatever that town inside the earth is called. And He also speaks on something close to my heart, and that is consciousness creates everything. It creates you, it creates me, it creates the aliens that may be visiting here. And the cat on the chair over there, it creates absolutely everything. So we are looking for answers, and maybe today we will find a few of those answers for ourselves that makes sense when we later on here will discuss this. So welcome to the show, Bret.
Welcome, Brad. Yay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. Yay. Thanks for being here with
Great to
us.
see you guys.
Good good to be
Yeah.
with you. I would like to see you.
Great to hear me. Right.
Yeah. Great voice.
Yeah, we were going to do this video of Bret here, but I guess the computer gods said, no, not tonight.
You know, I did. I said a couple of prayers before this too, just so there'd be no technical difficulties. And maybe they thought maybe I should have did an extra 10 or 12.
Yeah, there you go.
My apologies.
No,
That's all right. We'll
no
forgive you.
worries.
But now you have done so much in the arena of tying the loose ends in the UFO movement together. And these loose ends, they are actually giving some answers. And some of these answers are not necessarily easy to accept because some of them are uncomfortable. But speak about some of the greatest discoveries that you have done in that area, because we are going to be all ears.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, consciousness, I think, is the golden thread that ties all these issues together. I was a music journalist in Chico, California, which is about 2 hours north of Sacramento in Central California. And I got a job as a music writer and reviewer for a local paper. And so I started cutting my chops as a writer by writing about music shows, local music shows. And then every so often a big act would come through, and I'd get to talk to any of the biggest reggae stars you could imagine, or the blues guys,
Wow.
heavy metal guys, and occasionally I'd get an old timer like Pat Boone or Chubby Checker.
Wow.
And they would just, Merle Haggard, another big one.
Wow.
And they would just drop these pearls of wisdom on me, right? And so, you know, that got me thinking about some stuff that happened in my childhood, where it turns out, as I look back, it was rich in UFO content. I used to watch Star Trek with my dad. My mom and dad were divorced, so my dad would come into town once a month, and I'd spend the weekend with him at my grandparents' house, and we'd watch Star Trek late at night. And so you know, early on I drew a lot of comparisons from my dad to Captain Kirk, of course, and that was kind of my intro into the paranormal. On my mom's side of the family, growing up with my stepdad, we would watch In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, or one time they took me to the movies and it was Von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods.
Wow.
And I saw that when I was a real little kid. And so as I started doing these music interviews, I started drawing comparisons to these early childhood experiences, and the connection was consciousness. That's what music and UFOs, they have many things in common, but the main thing in my view is that music gives an individual, a listener, a chance to explore their feelings and various parts of your consciousness. Sometimes, depending on the kind of music, you might achieve an altered state of consciousness. And it's the same thing with the UFO. A UFO experience, even though it may be only a few seconds, for some people that's enough time to have an altered state of consciousness kick in. And then you immediately start to ask yourself the big questions: who am I and why am I here? And I feel like music and UFOs have that in common. They have that ability to take a person to another place and get that individual to start asking those kind of big life questions. And so that's kind of where it all started for me. They at Synthesis Magazine in Chico, they let me write about UFOs a couple times, just kind of dabbling in. It was a little different for a music paper, but I really started to relish those opportunities when I got to write about it, because, as I'm sure you guys well know, writing is very cathartic and therapeutic. And I really just got a good rush out of doing that. So that started to continue. the whole thing with music, and then UFOs kind of grew up concurrently, and you know, it's led to many different theories. And so if you want to discuss my biggest, I think, revelation about that is what is the definition of magic. Because magic seemed to be cropping up in all kinds of places. Magic is often used to describe musical performances. Yes. Magic is often described in the association with UFOs, especially if you're studying indigenous cultures, where they do rituals to commune with their star brothers and sisters. And so magic, as you guys I'm sure know, right, is has to do with one's consciousness and the secret latent powers of a human being's consciousness, how to manifest or each next outcome of an event. And so I began to explore what magic was. And there's many definitions, and that didn't make my understanding any easier necessarily, because I couldn't quite put a finger on it. But for years and years, the definition that really struck me was Arthur C. Clarke's definition, which, paraphrasing, goes something like this: high technology in an advanced culture looks like magic to a primitive culture. Yep. So that juxtaposition and that definition really got me thinking about what's going on. And so long story short, I had several key teachers, Druid Priestess teachers, Ascended Master teachers. And what I realized at one point was that any magical tradition around the world uses three main tools. They're what I call the tools of manifestation. And those are intentions, symbols, and rituals. And it's the combination of those three tools that you can manifest the desired outcome to any event if you're using them in the right way. So to take that a step further, I realized that everything a human being does, no matter how mundane, you don't have to have a pointed hat and a wand and be standing in a circle or a pentagram or any of those iconic kind of magical images. A human being uses the three tools every day of their lives to discern, to navigate, and to communicate. So, for example, right now, my intention is to communicate with you two wonderful people, and I'm choosing word symbols that express my intentions, and then I'm acting them out in the physical world in this ritual called a Zoom meeting. So, and the intention is to manifest the desired outcome of an interview. Hopefully a good interview.
Yeah.
And so that kind of permeated my thinking on multiple levels. And I began to see what Jordan Maxwell taught me. I spent some time studying one-on-one with Jordan Maxwell, and he said that the world was ruled by magic. Society was ruled by magic. And I didn't get that at first. It took me a long time to get that. But when I came up with my own definition of magic, the usage of ritual, symbols, and intentions, I began to see what Jordan Maxwell was talking about. And so, so that has to do, that's why music is done in concerts. Concerts are a form of ritual. And this is why native cultures around the world would use ritual to communicate with their star brothers and sisters that ride in UFOs. Sometimes they don't ride in UFOs, they're entities, right? Yeah. But either way, consciousness is using these three tools to manifest this desired outcome. So I would say it's discovering my own definition of magic would be my greatest self achievement in my own understanding. So
I like that. It frames the law of attraction in a very what would the word be? Enticing, exciting, romantic kind of way, which for me only adds to the feeling, right? It adds to the feeling of my word symbols, my visual symbols, and adding to the momentum of my symbols to connect and then draw to me. I go to it, it comes to me, right? For manifestation.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Those words and sensations, they kind of compound on each other, because I know there are sometimes when you say certain words, then it gives you a feeling that can give you an exhilaration of happiness, or it could be other things. So this, when you communicate like that, it has a frequency, a thought frequency that travels. And a telepathic entity can pick that up and understand what you are thinking about. And I believe that is what many of the extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings are doing. What do you think on that?
Well, I definitely think that many of the ET species that are coming to Earth are far more advanced than us, and they know us better than we know ourselves. And and so what may be advanced looking to us, to them is everyday kind of interacting. And I think you're right, they interact with the knowledge of frequencies on a far greater level than the average human. So that I guess a fishing metaphor might work, where fish, they're just swimming around in the ocean or the stream, and then you drop a line in, and it's like the fish at the right frequency is going to grab the hook, and then there's a connection there. So I don't know if that's the best metaphor, but we're the fish, and every so often we're able to establish that connection where we get hooked.
Yeah.
And then there's a channel there, and knowing who that is on the other end of that fishing pole or the other end of the channel, that's a whole another ball of wax. But yeah, those channels get opened through frequency connections. And I think part of my own personal growth was learning how to, they say the metaphor is raise your vibration.
Yes.
And I've tried to do that over the years, right? Whatever that means to the individual. And I can definitely tell you that I've had a number of experiences on that path. And I think on whatever pace you're going, it's not a race. That's what people need to be doing, is raising their vibration. As they do that, however slowly, especially in my case, however slowly, increased activity begins to happen as you get that connection is made solid. So, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to ask you how you raise your vibration, but I want to also mention, in the beginning of Broadcast Team Alpha, we were interviewing experiencers, a lot of them. And it was so interesting to me that the people that we were interviewing, they were some of the most sweetest souls. Like there's one man in particular, he was a young man. He would go out and water the lawn every night and water the flowers, and he was just such a beautiful soul. He was a dad, he loved his kids. He didn't really think about raising his vibration, but his vibration was really sweet and really peaceful. And then there were other qualities in the other experiencers that I noticed, would factor in, right, to a good vibration. So,
Right.
with that being said, what do you do? What ritual do you do? A ritual to raise your vibration, or is it a daily practice, or?
Well, it definitely, I think for me, because I came from a very competitive background in athletics, and I had a real dominant father figure. And so for me, I definitely needed to focus on raising my vibration. Maybe some other people, it happens a little more naturally. But for me, it was about being honest with myself and identifying what my emotional issues were. And then begin to start processing them. And then that's where athletics came in a lot, because I already knew how to run.
Yes.
And so running has definitely helped me work through many of my stuck emotions from relationship traumas, from traumas with my parents growing up, maybe at work when I was a young man. And then as I shed certain outer rough layers of those emotions, I began to do other things like meditate, like you're saying. I got stung by a bunch of bees in 2006, and it kind of cooked my insides, and I got diagnosed with adrenaline burnout. And so during that time, I did a visualization where, we grew up as a water skiing family. So we'd go to the boat out in the Delta in the Bay Area, do our water skiing down the sloughs or whatever. And then when we come into the marina, you get the 5-mile-an-hour buoy, and the motor would my stepdad would let off the gas and the motor would wind down, and then we kind of coast in. And so I did this visualization where I was the motor calming myself down.
Wow.
And that seemed to really work for me. And here I am about 13 years later after that bee sting attack. And I used to break out when I'd eat any kind of food. I'd break out in these like little hives.
Yes.
And it turned out there's cortisol was in them, because inevitably I'd have to mess with them, right? And so I'd like pop one like a mosquito bite, and it would be cortisol coming out. And that doesn't happen anymore. I'm still gluten-free from that incident, but I can get away with a little bit of pizza every so often.
Yeah.
And so there's not something I can just say, do this and it'll work, because for me, it seemed like the baby steps were so small that I just had to kind of disconnect from it and just make it into a lifestyle.
Yes.
And where every day I'm just trying to be calm every day. I'm trying to process emotions every day. I'm trying not to react to things emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And through that newfound composure over the years, I have definitely been able to handle a wider variety of situations in interacting with people,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in jobs, or
Yes.
even trying to be a public speaker was a very anxious situation for me in the beginning.
For many.
So, right. And I think that's you're not alone when you feel anxiety over a public lecture, but once you get prepared, that helps calm you. And then you do it a few times. And once you do it a few times, man, I got a kick out of it. And I turned out to really like it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So for me, that was huge growth right there.
Yeah. So you had an athletic background, so no doubt you had experienced the runner's high, right? That
Absolutely.
beautiful endorphin time.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Right? What a great vibration that is. When I would click into the runner's high,
Yeah.
that's when I would start my affirmations.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would
can see
always
that.
do it when I was running.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would get to a state where I would perceive that I was this little being inside my head riding in this body.
Wow.
So that was kind of weird. But when I got to that state, it was almost like I felt no pain. I could pick up my pace subconsciously, and that that's definitely was a tool that was valuable during that athletic career.
Definitely. Oh, that's
And
amazing.
I see now that we have another 5 minutes here. We're going to run a commercial, but before we get to that point, I want to talk a little bit about you are. I think you are writing something here about UFOs and the inner Earth PR agents of Ascension.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit. I'm very interested in that, and telos and what the connection is to the inner Earth.
Okay. So
yes.
back in 2006 or 7, I was writing for UFO Magazine. Bill and Nancy Burns were running that, and I'd get the issue every month, and I would see this ad for Messages of the Hollow Earth. It was a book by Diane Robbins, the ambassador to Telos. And it was just a provocative image of the Earth with like a quarter section taken out of it, and light like streaming out from the center of the Earth out through this quarter chunk that was taken out. And I was just fascinated by it. So I asked my editor, Nancy Burns, hey, what's up with this ad? It's can I get a copy of that book? Do you guys have an extra copy? And she said, you know what? Diane Robbins is one of our best advertisers, and we need someone to go up to Mount Shasta and get the story.
Wow.
So I said, well, I'm in Chico. I'm about 2 hours from Mount Shasta. So I said, that's me. So I went up and did a series of interviews with Diane Robbins, 2007, 2008, 2009 in there. Still friends with her to this day. She's a sweetheart. And I got the story of how she was a channel for the mayor or high priest, if you will, of the city of Telos,
Wow.
which is supposedly about 1.5 miles or so roughly beneath Mount Shasta. It's a couple miles wide, maybe like a half mile tall. There's various levels, 7 or 8 levels, and it's a place where beings from Lemuria supposedly landed on Mount Shasta many thousands of years ago, 20 to 30,000 years ago, supposedly. I'm always fascinated by different dates that people have with things, but it was a long time ago when Lemuria sank in the Pacific. The survivors saw the island of Mount Shasta, landed on it, and then over the years, they realized that either it was too harsh on the surface or the solar radiation became threatening to them. And maybe for a variety of reasons, they went inside the earth and they started to live underground, where in their isolation, they began to advance and develop spiritually, and to the point where they're no longer in the physical, supposedly. They're like, some people say it's like a 1 or 2 channels over from us, or it's a different frequency, but they have solidity, but just not as dense as our what we call reality here on Earth. But they developed into ascended masters. And so Diane Robbins was channeling the leader of this group of ascended masters. And what I found really fascinating about that was that they were talking about these certain themes would come up, like how humans need to raise their vibrations, or how humans are really meant to be immortal. They would have high technology of a variety of kinds, including UFOs. Oftentimes it was crystal technology, or they were taller than what we 6 to 6.5, 5.5 to 6.5 feet is a normal human, let's say. Wow. And no offense to anyone below 5.5 feet, but they were like 7 feet plus. And so over the course of these interviews, and Diane actually facilitated an interview, a Q&A with me and Adama. So I wrote Adama a bunch of questions. Diane asked him about these questions, and then Adama shot back. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That's very cool.
But I began to notice these themes were prevalent in other inner Earth stories. So you can look at the tales of Shambhala, similar stories of taller beings that live in a different frequency, that travel by UFOs if they so decide, or they have other high technology, oftentimes crystals. They're taller than us. I've got a list of, I think I'm up to 17 different traits now. I'm doing a bar graph chart where I got the different inner Earth stories on one side, and then across the top are all the different traits of these stories. And so what I began to realize as a public relations major, and let me tell you, I'm a little embarrassed that it took me this long to see it, but I finally figured out that, oh my God, this is a public relations campaign. And when I brought that up to Diane Robbins, she says, that's exactly it. She says, the inner Earth people are trying to gently nudge the surface societies towards ascension by raising their vibration. And so that at a certain point, the inner Earth people can come to the surface and we can be a family again. Wow. They consider themselves to be our cousins, our relatives of some kind. Mm-hmm. And then the whole thought is that all the people together, the ascended masters, the inner Earth people, Bigfoot, all the surface societies, and the Earth, ideally will all walk into ascension together. Wow. So the big revelation for me was then I thought, well, you know what? I have all my textbooks from college because I'm a public relations major. Right. So I dug them up and put the structure of a PR campaign on the left-hand side of a paper. And then I started matching it up with what I've learned about the inner Earth, and it matched up perfectly. Wow. So that I'm like, oh my God, this is a formal public relations campaign that E.L. Bernays didn't invent public relations back in the 1920s. My guess is, and I haven't found this clue yet, but I'm looking for it. My guess is he had some type of an epiphany or download experience where he thought about what a public relations campaign was. Then he gets the credit for inventing it on Earth. But if the inner Earth people are using a formal public relations campaign, that tells me public relations is not only older than the 1920s, it's some type of a universal method of communication that's been around maybe as long as humanity or even before.
That is brilliant.
Then I took it one step further and I applied the history of UFOs to the
Wow.
public relations campaign structure, and it matched up perfectly.
Wow.
So, for example, if a public relation campaign is 3 phases, there's the adaptation phase, where you study your target public that you're going to communicate to and learn everything you want to know about them. Then there's a strategy phase where you pick the way in which you're going to contact them. And then the evaluation phase where you evaluate how you did. It's really simple. Well, in the adaptation phase, there's a category that says that you got to study your target public. Well, if you reverse that and look at occupants of UFOs or inner Earth people, they know us better than we know ourselves, right? So that's just like one of the things that lined up really neatly. And yeah, so that's what this book is about. You're good. In the end, we're going to call the book Agents of Ascension, but there's a little pre-title that's UFO and Inner Earth PR Agents of Ascension. And then
Okay, I see now that we're a little bit after the bottom of the hour, so let's go ahead and run that commercial so we can find out why we need to drink coffee. Oh,
Do you need a why?
yeah.
I knew that there was a need because my father had a need. And if my father had a need, then how many other people have a need?
The key to Tyler's coffee is the roasting process. Because Mother Nature makes the coffee bean. We can only work with the processing.
We knew we wanted to go USDA certified organic. So we wanted to be the purest and cleanest coffee in the world. We had to source stuff from Africa, we had to source stuff from Brazil, we had to source stuff from Chile, and we put it through our proprietary Z-roasting processor. So what that really truly means to you is that the coffee doesn't have inflammatory properties in it. I'm dedicated to serving 50 million Americans that suffer from stomach-related modalities, and also the millions of other people that just deserve a great tasting cup of coffee that's healthy and safe.
Okay, we are back with, now you understand about coffee, because you got to remember, there's something here that you really need to know, and that is that it is very important that we get the coffee every day, because remember the dinosaurs, they never drank coffee, and we all know how that story ended, so we just don't want to take any chances. And this is acid-free coffee, so that's why we need to drink it. Anyway,
It's
you know,
also, Augie, it's also organic and it doesn't have any mold in it. I didn't realize that coffee could be delivered to you right from the store with mold in it, and it's so not healthy. Yeah.
I understand a lot of them have that.
Yeah, I love this coffee. It is my favorite so far.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to say that.
Yep, that's good. Hey, also, Bret, we for the listeners here that joined us late, we are talking with Bret Lueder, and I want to talk a little bit more about UFOs and the alien presence. Not just the presence, maybe, but also the abductions, because it happens an awful lot. There are millions of people that know, not just think, but know they have been taken or invited onto a spaceship, taken out of the atmosphere, show them the Earth, or they just find themselves on a table just being scraped the skin to get DNA or whatever happens on there. But why do you think that happens? I know there's a reason, otherwise they wouldn't do it. So what is your take on it? Why are we treated like lab rats?
You know, this is one of my most favorite subjects, Augie and Nori. So thank you for bringing that up. A little quick sidebar. I didn't know that coffee was delivered with mold, because I used to love coffee, but then after I got stung by the bees, I got headaches. So maybe that's because of an allergic reaction to mold. So that was a very pertinent little tidbit you just gave me there, Nori. I'm gonna have to explore that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the framework of the abductions is one of ascension. That's the bigger picture. Within that bubble of ascension is for simplification, you have the good guys and the bad guys, let's say. The good guys may pick a person up. You can tell if they're good if they ask the person if they want to go. And an old buddy of mine, Wendell Stevens, definitely had some cases where the person was approached just like you would a friend or another human being, a neighbor, and you ask them if they want to go for a ride. And that to me seems to be respecting the law of free will. And then you have the side of abductions, as I'm sure we're well aware, where people are taken out of their sleep in the middle of the night and dragged through walls, and all kinds of weird stuff happens to them on the ship. And so the way I look at that now is that you have advanced beings that are trying to help us to advance along the same path that they did. I was just looking at my notes from Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, a very famous book. And there in that, he talked about how abductees, their duty was to help others that weren't as far along as them. So if you go to a craft and you get a bunch of special abilities or imbued with knowledge, now it's your duty to now go help other people with that knowledge. Now, there's lots of crossover in the abduction world, so I'm really just simplifying categories here. But there's the other side of that now, where people are abducted, and also I think it's for ascension, but it's maybe not for the ascension of the humans, but maybe for the ascension of the species that's doing the abduction. I know for years and years, especially after reading Behold a Pale Horse by the late great William Cooper, he would talk about the Greys and their genetic experiments on humans, that supposedly they were in some kind of a genetic bottleneck and they needed an infusion of DNA so that their species didn't die out. On the one hand, I can be sympathetic towards that, because who wants to die? At the same time, I think they're going about it in the wrong way. They're not respecting free will. And then, and if you follow that whole story with the Greada Treaty, the legendary Greada Treaty, where supposedly Eisenhower cut a deal with the tall Greys on the tarmac of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That supposedly that deal was broken at some point when the Greys figured out that they didn't need us. They didn't need to honor the contract. They could just take whoever they want. And we were of no consequence to them. We were just like cattle. And so that's where you see guys like Phil Snyder coming forward and claiming there's a big battle at the Dulce base where our top guys get wiped out by the technology of the Greys. I believe there was another legendary battle under Area 51. There's probably been lots of battles, I would guess. Once humans realized that we were under their control, and in other words, so Eisenhower initiates setting up the MJ-12 group as a way to monitor the contract. But then MJ-12 gets scared the bejesus, they get scared to death of these beings, and now they're serving the Greys, this particular species of Greys. And so this is where, at least one way to interpret why things are the way they are. This is why we have the cabal. The cabal is the current end result of the Greys influencing of MJ-12. So MJ-12 is responsible for initiating the banking laws, let's say, that are getting more tight and tight every year, or the different draconian laws that are placed upon us, especially upon our right to travel, like with speeding and all the different registration violations and insurance, and all this stuff is meant to extract our wealth through the magical symbols of money. It's our energy. It's our soul energy. I learned that from Jordan Maxwell. So when you look at it that way, they're extracting our energy on a daily basis as a matter of standard business, and they get our own people to do it to their own people. So
now I think you touched on something that I just want to comment on, because
sure.
I think you're really on to something here. You said that the Greys, in a roundabout way, you kind of indicated you thought maybe the Greys were in charge. And I don't think the cabal or the Will Bilderberger or the the Committee of 300 or any other group on earth is actually at the top of the food chain. I think the top of the food chain is off the planet, where they are off the planet are telling someone here to do certain things.
I'll stay open to that, sure. Because I admit I don't really know, but I just try to. I think human beings are in a really difficult position because our consciousness has these certain blind spots where we can be taken advantage of, and when species have lived many, many hundreds of years longer than our average lifespan, they tend to get to know us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, the way we would fly a drone over into the Middle East and kill a bunch of people, and some guy's sitting back in a military base somewhere playing like a video game.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell, if we do that, why wouldn't the ETs in control do that if ETs are indeed in control?
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't surprise me at all that you'd say that. I definitely stay open to that.
Mhm.
Another big possibility is this whole biblical scenario where you have the light versus the dark. You have this nefarious character named Lucifer and all of his minions, supposedly. I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that the ET thing, this could be another one interpretation of the ET thing, or our like someone like Jacques Vallée would say that what we call ETs today are really the demons of the past. So maybe they're the same thing, maybe they're separate. I'm not sure, but either way, certain ET species appear to be dark, or at least selfish. Maybe they don't think they're evil. I mean, I don't think humans think we're evil because we eat cows, but cows might have a different opinion of that. So what is evil? I'm not exactly sure, but there's definitely beings out there that don't have humans' best interest in mind. And one of the theories that I found very fascinating, studying this kind of fringe Christian tradition in Yuba City, California, which is about 45 minutes north of Sacramento, in the Central Valley, was that going back to the Book of Enoch, Enoch was getting taken to the throne of God by the angel Metatron, and in doing so, they went past the second heaven, and Enoch heard the fallen angels that were imprisoned there. I think the word was lamenting. He heard them lamenting, moaning, right? Mm-hmm. So he says, Metatron, take me over here. I want to go see what these guys are all about. So Enoch has this conversation with these beings, and the beings are telling him, hey, not all of us are guilty. And so please go talk to God on our behalf since you're going there, and ask him if he could free us ones that aren't guilty. Just the big names were guilty, like kind of like a reflection of the Nazis at Nuremberg, or, in the trials. The lower guys were just saying, hey, we were just following orders, right? But they were in the end, humans judged them just the same as the generals. And so in the end, in this story as well, Enoch has to come back down and say, you know what? I told God about you guys, and he said, nope, you're there till Judgment Day. But this is Enoch's advice. He said, sing the praises of humans and sing the praises of God from now till Judgment Day, and maybe God will change his mind. Wow. So what I see with that in mind, that's a fascinating theory to me, is that this hybrid breeding program is not only a way for the disembodied souls who are supposedly the demons from the flood, the Nephilim, that died in wars before the flood and during the flood, to inhabit this earth again. But some of them do it to try to help humans, to try to, quote unquote, sing the praises of God by helping humans. Others are doing it to try to get a foothold. And then this other part of those, the big bad boy ones, they hate humanity and want to defile humanity in any way possible. And so like David Jacobs has outlined, you got this hybrid breeding program, and all kinds of weird stuff happens within that. If you've read a Bud Hopkins book, or again, David Jacobs, who's the guy from Harvard, John Mack, just some bizarre situations arise as these beings begin to inhabit bodies that they can legally, spiritually inhabit, since they can't legally, spiritually inhabit our own bodies. From what I've learned, that whole idea of possession is a misnomer. They can't actually possess the bodies because they don't have the legal rights to, but they can greatly influence the bodies, human bodies, if we, with free will, open doorways. So doorways of drugs and sex and alcohol and extreme emotions or trauma, which is where you get trauma-based mind control.
Exactly.
So they fracture a person's personality into X amount of number of little compartments. Two viewpoints on that is one is a program you can put in there. The other one is an entity. So it turns out those are one and the same thing. They're just different aspects of the same kind of energy, which leads us to AI. So I think that's what's going on now is with AI, you have entities from outside the world, like you were saying earlier, Augie, that use AI as their avatar, like we see on that new TV show about the singing avatars, right? It's almost like that show is trying to condition us towards that idea, or they're maybe trying to let us know this is what's really going on as an offer to contract, so we would go along with it. But
yeah, and you
go ahead.
mentioned
No, I could ramble for days.
It's good.
Yeah. You mentioned the term demons.
Yeah.
And of course, demons, that is a religious term. And, they really did, back in the old days, there were jinns or demons and so on. But I think more so probably there are entities of a higher spiritual capacity and value and a lower vibrational spiritual capacity that could be the ones with mischievous ideas and thoughts of abuse for their own enjoyment.
Selfish, yeah.
Yeah, so that probably could be called demon in religious terms.
Sure.
But then again, we have all the way up the scale into light beings that come. They talk about them in old writing. They talk about the enlightened one, or they show up as light being that just lit up like light bulbs. When they meet you in their old writings about this,
Sure.
The shining ones they call them. So there are spiritual beings, and even though they are nasty ones among them, they're still spiritual beings also, but of a lower vibration, so they have different intentions.
I'll stay open to that. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's a big universe out there.
Yeah, it is.
All the possibilities are probably true at some point, somewhere.
This concept of aliens, ET, extraterrestrial, interdimensional, it's like probably kind of a recent term, because we started to figure out that there's a document in the FBI's website saying that, yes, we know that there are interdimensional beings come here. And I read that thing and it's very clear. But all the way back into the 1950s, in fact, there are paintings back into the 14 or 1500s that show a little disc in the sky with light beams going down. They've been here a long time.
That's right. Long time. Well, probably here before us.
Yeah.
Some researchers say that they made us. If you're familiar with the Zechariah Sitchin books, like starting with the 12th planet in 1976, was beings from this 12th planet in our solar system that actually genetically created us roughly, I think it was 450,000 years ago. So, and then there's many other theories similar to that, but different. So, what does that mean for humanity? Does that mean there's no God, or did these beings violate universal law by making us, like as we're starting to do now, and making with clones?
Yeah.
So are we? Zechariah Sitchin definitely makes the case that we're just mimicking the same behavior as our parents, the Anunnaki, that their early genetic experiments created the Nephilim, and that we're products of those genetic experiments right now.
Yeah, and guess what? We are doing now what the Anunnaki did 450,000 years ago. So
I would agree.
What
Cloning
is
on top of that.
what is that, Augie? What is it? What are we doing that they did?
Well, we are now we are doing gene splicing. We are taking a species and add or subtract to the genetic code to create different traits in that species.
That's right.
So that's what they did 450,000 years ago. The Anunnaki created man, they call it, a man of dirt, and they used some term like that.
Right.
But and on the other hand is that there are other also the Dogon people from Africa. They claim that about 5,000 years ago there were extraterrestrials that came down and kind of they showed them how to create a benevolent society and how to live in peace and so on, because they created them also. And they are the tall black race, which I believe is the Maasai. But the Maasai, every one of them is over 6 foot tall.
Interesting.
So they've been, and then we have the same thing in China. They have stories like this. So what you're saying here is right on target. We're not the only ones that was created. There probably is others too that has been manipulated.
Right. My information is that there's at least 5 different seeds on the planet from different alien races.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what, that kind of information is always fascinating as a journalist. It's a nightmare trying to corroborate stuff like that, to write about it with credibility. So it's interesting to bring up, but for me, I feel like I'm being honest with myself when I say I don't really know what the truth is with that, but what I do is I look for patterns. Mm-hmm. And so I take information like that, put it on the back burner, and look around and wait for something else to strike a chord with me that reverts back to that, and then I can start to build a picture. So whatever the case actually is, I think that it's humanity itself as a whole, as a society, is at a juncture where we need to deal with our negative baggage, our trapped emotions, our stuck emotions, our trauma, in order to move forward. So I think that if there are good ETs out there, and I do think there are good ETs out there, they're kind of hands off right now because they want to see what we're going to do. Yeah. Going back to the Greada Treaty, good, decent aliens looking at that, like say we rejected an offer from the Tall Blondes, supposedly Eisenhower did, right? Because they didn't want to give us weaponry. But the Greys did. And so the Tall Blondes now, even though they may contact individuals or small groups, they've backed off in large because we made the choice through free will to deal with these other guys, these lower vibration guys, as you say, Augie. And so until we deal with that, I think our society is blocked from entering into the bigger picture of the Galactic Federation. Even though, like, if, we talked about a little bit about last night, Augie, about Michael Salla. And he's talking to different contactees. One of them is Elena Danan, and she supposedly is a representative of the Galactic Federation. So the Galactic Federation hasn't forgotten about us. They're still planting information and seeds within us on how to deal with the darkness. They're trying to nudge us without violating our own free will, but they're trying to help us, I would say, within the PR campaign, to help us move forward through this darkness to get to the point where we can ascend. So
that's our goal.
We got to clean our spiritual homes individually and en masse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is our goal. And also, I see we are coming down towards the end of the show. Could you tell people where they can get a hold of you, and speak also a little bit about your books and your writings?
Okay. Yeah. Right now, my website's been hacked a couple times. I can't seem to get it up without it getting hacked somehow. So I'll take that as an honor that someone's focusing on me.
Yes.
But my Facebook page seems to be going okay. So it's Bret.Lueder, Facebook/Bret.Lueder. And you can reach me there, send me a private message. I wrote my first book, and you can see the covers of these books on my website, on my Facebook page. My first book's called Song in Your Heart, The Story of the Search for the Lost Note. And it's a story of what I describe as the roots reggae Rastas in terms of a global struggle for the control of human consciousness. So not all the Rastafari play roots reggae music, and not all roots reggae musicians are Rastafarians, but the ones that are Rastafarians, I call them the roots reggae Rastas. and they believe that Haile Selassie was the second coming of Christ, that the former emperor of Ethiopia, and they go around the world, literally perpetrators of a certain vibration called the heartbeat rhythm, and they're trying to change consciousness on the earth. So I found that very fascinating. It's all conspiratorial when you get into that whole history and all that. So that's book one of a 3-part trilogy. The next book forthcoming will be out in mid 2022. It's called Tales of a Heavy Heart: UFOs, Magic, and Impending Doom. And that's book 2 in the third trilogy, in a 3-part. Of course, a trilogy is a 3-part. Book 2, and then so I also wrote a UFO Hunter's Guide back in 2012, and that's for all levels of ufologists, but especially for the beginners, because I noticed going to conferences, you've got a bunch of the people that are really into this. All the UFO buffs go to the conferences, but the average person just kind of still maybe sees a TV show here or there, or they get most of their UFO information from Hollywood, different movies. So I wrote the book with them in mind, to try to increase those numbers at the UFO conferences, to try to make people aware of what's going on, and to get a handle on a subject that seems ungraspable maybe from the outside, because it has so many different facets and avenues and rabbit holes that you can go down. So that's called a UFO Hunter's Guide. And then, as we mentioned earlier, UFO and Inner Earth PR, Agents of Ascension, will be the next book. That'll be out. I plan to have it out by the end of February.
Awesome.
And that's about the public relations campaign being perpetrated on us, and the battle of public relations campaigns to either help humanity ascend or not help humanity to ascend. So
nice.
Yeah, that's what I got going on right now. I also got a law DVD out too. It's called An American Law Primer, and it's a 2-disc set. And the first disc is about the magic of the all caps name, and where that came from, and how that applies to each individual. And then the second part is how to beat traffic tickets. So yes, all that stuff is related because it involves consciousness.
Yes.
Real quickly, when you talk about the law, if you ever go to court by yourself without an attorney, I was real nervous and anxious, and I couldn't control my emotions. And so what I learned was that court is actually where you go to find out who you are, because they think you're the all caps name. And you have to not only master your own emotions, but you also have to, in doing that, you have to be able to express to them that you're not the all caps name, you're not the estate, and that you're the flesh and blood sovereign, and their corporate fictitious laws, actually statutes and codes, don't actually apply to you. Common law applies to you, not statutes and codes. But
actually,
that's a whole other interview right there. But
when they give you that all capital name, then they create a corporation in your name. And
absolutely.
If you go to the United States Styles Manual and make a photocopy of the page, it's not very big, but made a photocopy of the page where it says that any name with a capital letter writing is not the actual person, but a corporate entity created for business purposes. Make a copy of that one and take it into the judge and say, look here, you can have my corporate name, but you can't touch me. Goodbye. Well, there's a little more to it than that. But
no, you're dead on. You hit that's in a small one sentence. That's about as good as anyone could do describing it.
Yep.
So yeah. So that law, UFOs, and music have all that in common. Consciousness.
Yes.
So.
Consciousness. And we rounded back to the beginning. I love it. Brad, thank you so much for being here.
It was a pleasure. Fun time. I wish it was longer. You're having such a good time.
We'll have to invite you back, please.
Okay, I would love that.
All right.
There's so much more to talk about. Gosh, we didn't even touch anything with Billy Meyer. I wanted to talk about him and disclosure, and there's so much more.
Right.
Maybe you could come back in about a month or so.
You got it. Whenever you guys want, just give me a heads up. It was
Sounds great.
Fun. Love doing this. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody in the chat room. You guys are pretty lively. Woohoo! There's some questions in there for you, Augie. Dolores noticed how massive your hands were. So,
what?
how big your hands are, and I commented that you're really tall. So people have asked some personal questions that you may want to go back in and answer. So
all right, Augie.
Anyway, they're right. That's a big
buddy.
hand. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Please join us next week, and we will definitely have Brad back. Everybody is so grateful that we had you on, Brad. Thank you so much. And I'm going to end with gratitude again. Thank you. Much love to everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye,
Thank you.
guys.